and we know where the content. And you made a bracha with a color. But that doesn't make it right.
Okay. Basically, if you see other people do it, you know that's not right.
No, it's left. Okay. Year of Learning. Learning sponsors. Year of Learning. Martin Lipman, a family in memory of his wife, Martha Hanabat Pinchas. Friends of Herb Jeremiah Tzvi Ben Zev. Friends of Sam Coleman, Shmuel Ben Yaakov. Friends of Gideon Lazinski, Mordechai Shlomo Ben Meir. Bella and David Adler in memory of her father, Eliyahu Ben Yosef Cohen. Those who were inspired by our Rebbetzin and Emerita, Sheila Shapiro, Sarah Esther Malka, but Meshulam Yisachar. Gail and Leslie Kaplan in memory of their parents, Mushka Shprinzer Bad Yosef Chaim V'Chava, Hanan Ben Moshe Eliezer V'Chana, Pesha Bat Shmuel Yitzchak Halevi V'Tzipora, Isser Ben Yoam Moshe HaKohen V'Chana. Rexford Friends of Gladys Sherman, Gutta Bat Meir. Michael Klein and Friends of Judah Klein, Yehuda Tzvi Ben Chaim. Marsha Braun in memory of her beloved husband, Harav Yerachmiel Ben Shmuel. Friends and family of Arthur Ritholz, Mordechai Yudel Ben Baruch Leib HaKohen. Month of Learning by Charlie Gelfenstein. In memory of his mother, Dacia Gilbert Meir Halevi. Also Charlie Gelfenstein in memory of his father, Meir Ben Yaakov. Ruvain and Susan Podolsky in memory of his mother, Fredel Bashraga Feivel. B. Pizer in memory of her sister, Rivka Bat Avram Michael Halevi. And today, an individual day of learning by Martin and Sandra Fish in memory of his mother, Tzivia Bat Eliezer. Hashem is having Aliyah, Krenk Rafia, Velti Yeshir Hashem Latliya. Kol B'nai Israel, good Kabench.
Oh my.
Amen.
Would your wife read
What? What'd you what?
She read the lady, but in memory of her beloved husband. After almost 60 years, my wife.
You know that story. It's a Florida story. Lady calls up the local newspaper. She says, "I want to put an ad." The guy says, "It's $25 for 5 words." She says, "Okay." He says, "What's the ad?" She says, "Schwartz died." He said, "Lady, you get 5 words. You got 3 more words." She said, "Okay, Schwartz died, Cadillac for sale."
Love it. Love it.
Very Florida.
What page?
Okay, we are on
Right before the Mishnah.
We're at the Mishnah on Lamed Daled Amud Beis, 34b at the Mishnah. 34b the Mishnah. Okay. All right.
34B3.
Yeah, we're gonna 34b.
B3.
Yeah, here's the Mishnah. Okay. So we're going to start. We're going to first contrast. The Mishnah is going to contrast places where the man is obligated for his ox, but not for himself, or for himself, but not for his ox. Chayav Adam and Chayav al Ma'aseh Shora. We have Yesh Chayav al Ma'aseh Shora. There's cases where a guy will be obligated to pay for what his ox damaged, and in the same case, of Pater Ma'aseh Atzmo, where he did the damage, he'll be exempt. Pater Ma'aseh Shora, there'll be a case where he's exempt on what the ox did, and in the same case, for Chayav al Ma'aseh Atzmo, is obligated when he did the very same thing. Ketzad, let's spell it out. We'll start the second case first. Shoro shabiyesh pata. If an ox did damage to a man and of course embarrassed the man, okay, who is pata? He's not to pay. Those things are only for a man who's obligated to. Embarrassment is only obligation of a man. Who should be a chaya? But if the man did damage and embarrassed the person he damaged, he has to pay. Shoro shasima is an abdo v'hipla shino. You know that a Jewish slave goes free. A slave goes free. When a slave goes free when the master takes out his eye or his tooth or any one of the limbs that are visible and won't grow back. And those things you see in other words, so if the slave goes free. So if the ox took out the eye or the tooth of the slave, Potter, he's exempt in the sense that that the slave does not go free. But who should see? But who should see me saying But if he himself took out the eye of a slave or his tooth, he's obligated to what? To free his slave. Okay, so there we saw examples of what? That the man is obligated for what he did and exempt if his ox did it. Shoro shechavu ba'avi b'imo. The other way, let's say that now if a man injures his father, it hits his father or mother and draws blood, so he is obligated to be killed. So we say shoro shechavu b'imo chayiv. If the ox injured his father or his mother, he has to pay with normal damages. But if he hit his father or mother and caused an injury that bleeds, Potter, he's exempt from paying. Why? Because of the famous principle of what? Of kamlei v'darabinei. Since he's going to have to be killed, so he's not obligated to pay the monetary obligation that he incurred at the same time. Shehidlik is okay. Also, sure, shehidlik is for Shabbos chayiv. If his ox lit a field on fire, let's say intentional to damage, with intention to do damage. Yeah, the pile of grain. He has to pay half damages for the pile of grain. But who should think it's a Gadish for Shabbos Potter? But if the man himself lights the grain pile on Shabbos, he's exempt. Why? Again, why? Because since he broke the Shabbos at the same time as he did the damage by lighting the fire, because he is obligated for his life. Now, this is a very famous principle in Shabbos. Usually, we say on Shabbos, remember, a person has to do a positive action to transgress the Shabbos. So when a person does an action that's destructive, in general, we say what? The law is that what? A destructive act, the person is right. The person is not obligated from the Torah. The person is not liable. The rabbis say no, but he's not obligated from the Torah. So he said, Tani Rabbi Abba, Kamed Rabbi Yochanan, he said something interesting. And we'll see later how it relates to our Mishnah. He said, Kolam Akalkal in Peturim, anybody who does it destructive, even one of the 39 malachas of Shabbos that he can't do, he does it in a destructive way, he is exempt. However, there are two malachas that are exempt from this rule. Two malachas that even though they're done destructively, the person is still obligated. What is that? Chutz michovel amavir, except for what? For causing an injury. Okay. Now, what is the malacha of causing an injury? So there's three opinions. One opinion is the malacha of causing an injury is shechting, is killing, as you say, was killing. One of them is that it's dying, because of the blood. And one of them is that it's dash, that it's really what's the word? Threshing. It's threshing, like threshing. But we'll take the simple one, that it's killing. Okay, so now, so therefore, so if a person draws blood on Shabbos, even though that's destructive, even though he does an injury on Shabbos that causes blood, he's still obligated, even though it's completely destructive. Umavir, and the same thing also when it comes to lighting a fire. And the reasons for that from the Psukim, we learn from the fact that the Torah tells us about Milah, or the Torah had to tell us that we can't kill a person we can't melt the lead to kill a person on Shabbos. So we know that these two are obligated, even though they are destructive. Amar Leisi, he said to him, he said, he said, that brisa which you just taught, that you just taught, go teach it outside. That's not the halacha. That is not the halacha. To say that what? That even when the destructive, that causing an injury or lighting a fire is obligated is not true. They're also exempt. But if you want to say there is such a teaching, I'll grant you, but that teaching is not what you think. There's a teaching that says that even though it's destructive, but there's a positive aspect to it, then they're obligated. So I'll show you that there's really a positive aspect to it. What does that mean? For example, chovel. Where is the case where even though it's actually destructive, but there's a constructive aspect to it? For example, a guy injures a person to draw blood, which is utterly destructive, and draws blood, which makes a bloody injury, which is utterly destructive. But since he wants the blood to feed to his dog, so there's a positive intention in the injury. Umavir, okay, but for the same thing, even though the lighting of the fire is destructive, they're putting something on fire, but since he needs the ashes, that's also considered positive. So really what he says is that your principle is not true. Even these two really always need what? A constructive purpose. Otherwise, a man is not obligated. Now we're going to ask a kasha. Yochanan says, well, is that really true? You want to tell me that lighting a fire is not obligated unless there's a positive aspect? I'm going to show you from our Mishnah what we just learned, that you're wrong. So none, we learned in our Mishnah, if his ox lit the grain pile on fire on Shabbos, he's obligated. Who? And if he did it, if he lit that grain pile on Shabbos, Potter, he's exempt. Now, who do me the shura? Since the Mishnah put the two things in opposition, so we have to say that they're both in the same circumstances. So him lighting the fire is the same circumstances as the ox lighting the fire. Masharo de lo kaboile, an ox is not lighting a fire because it's trying to make ashes, etc. A whole thing. So therefore, if the ox wasn't trying to make ashes, also what? Okay.
The person.
Also who? Afu, also the guy. Nami de Kavoile. Okay, he also was not trying, he also was not in need of ashes. Okotani Shapater. Nevertheless, we see what? That he's exempt from paying the money. But nation need the menasha because he is liable for his life. So you see what? That he transgressed the Shabbos, even though there was nothing positive in the lighting of the fire. Where it says low, he says no. What Rabbi Yochanan said is true. And even lighting a fire and even causing the injury has to have a positive aspect to it. Otherwise, he's exempt. And you say if you learn the other way, yes, they're put into that position. Instead of learning what that the ox is that he is like the ox, learn that the ox is like him. The opposite way, Rabbi Yochanan would say. And say what? Say low. He says, do me the day. Okay, sure, do me the day. The ox is compared to him. Mahu the kaboile. Just like the man is obligated because he wanted something positive, namely the ashes. I'm sure the kaboile has to be a case for the ox wanted the ashes, and that's the case where the guy is obligated.
But the ox causes exposure, causes humiliation.
Yeah.
He's not
no, because that's a different rule. Because your money, you're not; those things are not obligated for when your money damages.
But
that's
in a fit of anger, if you were to kill the ox because he embarrassed you, would you be responsible?
You're still responsible for everything you do. Humans are always responsible. It's very hard to make people unresponsible. One second. What's the case? He says, what's the case? Okay, since when does an ox need ashes? What's the ox doing that needs ashes? Amalei Rababi, he says, we're talking about Bishor. He says, no, it's really, where do we see such a thing? He says, what? Bishor Pikech, you have a smart ox. She also learned a shifa bagabo. He got a bite on his back. Okay, and he wants to burn the grain, the inga de bekutma, okay, the gan de bekutma, and he wants to roll in the ashes to make himself feel better, to heal the wound. I mean, no, 1 second. If we don't know what a man's intention is, he's not we can't apply the death penalty to him, even potentially. So if the case, he says, how do we know that the ox knows? Since you tell me what we're comparing the ox to the man, but the man, in order for the man to be chayav, we have to know that was his intention. Otherwise, he wouldn't be obligated. So then there must be, we know the intention of the ox. How do you know the intention? How do you know that the ox intended it? And the answer is, I'll tell you how we know. The basar, the klai, commanded bekutma, because after he burnt down the grain, we saw him rolling in the ashes. He says, "Amiki kai gavda." Do we really see such wise oxen around? The Gemara says, yeah, we do. Right? The heavy bear papa. My papa was a beer maker, and he had a certain ox, the heavy kavin lechinche. Now Rashi says it's teeth-herded. The language really sounds a little different, but that's what Rashi says it will say. So the ox is teeth-herded. So he pulled off the top. He opened up the container of beer. Okay, and he drank the beer, and he made himself better. So he says, one second. Now we defended Rabbi Yochanan. So it comes that even these two acts, even burning, and the way we said it now, even burning or causing an injury has to have a positive, constructive aspect to it, to be in order for the person to be obligated. The rabbi said to Rav Papa, okay, do me the day. Can you really give the answer like that? That we're comparing the ox to him, that just like the guy wants the ashes, the ox wants the ashes? Well, Tani, didn't we learn? They're following. Shora should be a pater. When we learned in the Mishnah, it said what? That if the ox does embarrasses a person in the course of damage, he's exempt for paying for the embarrassment. Who should be a shchai? But if the man embarrassed a person, he has to pay for the embarrassment when he damaged a person. I said, what? Sure, do me the day. So if you tell me what, if you tell me if the ox is compared to the guy, here, how could the ox possibly be like the man? In order for the man to have to pay, he has to have intention to embarrass somebody. The ox doesn't know what it's doing. The intention to embarrass somebody, there's no such thing. Okay, the Gemara says, no, you're making a mistake. The intention to embarrass, even by a man, doesn't have to be specifically about the embarrassment, but rather what? Kagonchen is kavin lahazik. All we need is that the ox intended to do damage, like we learned before. Okay, because we learned in a brisa, even by a man, this kavin lahazik, if he has intention to damage, even though he didn't have intention to embarrass. So we can compare the ox to the man, that just like the man is obligated when he embarrasses when he intended to do damage, and the ox, even though it intended to do damage, we don't have to pay for the embarrassment that it did. Okay, all that was one answer. So one answer was to answer the kasha when Rabbi Yochanan from our Mishnah. We said, don't worry, it was the issue was really where there was a positive constructive act. Okay, now we have another possibility. We could say like this, and it's an incredible piece. Masnisen v'shoge. Okay, it's really talking about what? It's talking where the person by mistake, he didn't know that it was Shabbos, or he didn't know that you weren't allowed to burn things. Okay, and he burnt down the grain pile. And even so, okay, if that's true, if he did it by mistake, so why is he potter? We're not going to kill him. So why is he exempt? The answer is because the Bechizkiya, the famous principle that we learned in Bechizkiya, that the principle of kamle b'derabamine. When we say that a person who incurs a financial obligation at the same time as a death penalty, it doesn't have to be where he's actually going to be liable to the death penalty. Let's say, for example, here where he did it by mistake, he didn't know that he was doing wrong. He's not going to get it. But the point is still, so long as he was eligible in theory for the death penalty, had he done it purposely, even when he did it by mistake, we can still consider it a death penalty case, and he's exempt from the monetary obligation that occurred at the same time. Where did we learn such a thing? Okay. No, so therefore what? So therefore we're going to say what? We can say what? He didn't need the ashes, okay? And nevertheless, okay, he didn't need the ashes. And even though he's not obligated, here's the point: he didn't need the ashes, so he's not going to be obligated for death. Why? Because it was completely destructive. If it's completely destructive, he's not going to get the death penalty. But I'm going to show you a principle that as long as the death penalty was potentially there, then even in such a case, the person is going to be exempt from monetary payment. So we're comparing, and it's a big kiddush. We're comparing what? Doing something by mistake, or we're comparing to doing something destructively. Whether he did it by mistake and potentially it would have been there had he did it purposely, or he did it destructively and it potentially would have been there had he done it constructively. Let's take a look. So one second. So we're comparing. So we're comparing two cases where the death penalty is not actual, but either in the case of by mistake, or in the case of doing a destructive action, even intentionally. We're comparing the two. Well, they're both cases where there's no death penalty, but potentially there is. That's the trick of this paragraph. The Tana of the Bechizkiya, because we learned the principle in the Bechizkiya, what? From the language of the Torah, the pasuk says, "Maka nefesh behema yishal." And if a person smites the soul of an animal, he shall pay. Maka adam yuma said, if a person smites a man, he shall die. So you see that the Torah Maka Adam, okay, Maka Behema. The Torah compared the smiting of a man to the smiting of the animal. Now be careful, the language here is backwards, or it seems backwards. Maka Behema, just like when it came to what are we comparing? Just like when he's smiting an animal, we have to pay money. Lo Halakta, we didn't make a difference. Bein Shogeg, whether he did it by mistake. Bein Bemezid, whether he did it purposely. Bein Miskaving, whether he did it intentionally. L'She'em Miskaving, whether he did it unintentionally. Bein derech yirida, whether he did it with his hand on the downward motion, the derech aliyah, the hand with the upward motion. We'll learn about later. Okay, lepotra mammon. On all those cases, okay, we don't exempt him from paying, ela lechayva mammon, but rather what we make him pay. Af maka adam, the same thing we compare. And when it comes to smiting a man, when a person murdered another person, we make no difference whether he did it by mistake. Amazing whether he did it on purpose. Famous Kavin, whether he did it intending to kill. Amos Kavin, if he did it not intending to kill. Bain derech yirida, whether he did it with the downward motion. The derech aliyah, with the upward motion. The chayvo mammon. In all those cases, we don't make any difference to say that he's not obligated. El potro moment, okay, but rather what? In all those cases, what we say that he is exempt from money. The same thing. So we see that that as long as there's a potential death penalty, even then when it's not actual. So even when he does it by mistake, since potentially it was there, the same thing here. Even though he did it purposely, destructively, but which is exempt. But since potentially, had he done it non-destructively, he would have been chayiv. So that is enough to say that he's exempt from monetary payment. So in both cases, we defended the principle of Rabbi Yochanan. Really, even burning or even causing an injury is only obligated if there's a constructive aspect. Rabbi said, 1 second, but how can you say what you just said? We must mukemes law b'shogeg. Can you really say that the guy burnt the field down, burnt the grain pile down by mistake? in a case where it's only potential, how can, and here's the point. It just means how can you say it was only potentially death penalty? What are you talking about? The language of the Mishnah is one because he is being judged for his life. It is a capital case. It is an actual capital case, not a potential one. I says no, don't worry. Even though that's the language, it just means to say, since had he done it purposely, he would have been he would have been judged for his life as a capital case. What would be a case? For example, the Kabbalah Lafra, which in this case here, look, see the word, it's translated. And what the word purposely here would be the equivalent of what? Equivalent of what? Of that he needs the ashes. Hashta here too. Meshogeg here too. Even when he didn't need the ashes, with the equivalent of by mistake. Okay, Potter, he is still exempt. Okay, we've done our job. Now we have a series of cases that are unbelievable, and we're going to use a beautiful analysis of a Mishnah to flush out the opinions of Sumchus and the rabbis. You know that in general, as we mentioned before, we see almost like a great general rule when it comes to monetary matters. If you want to collect money from somebody, you have to prove that he owes it to you, and the person who's accused never has to prove that they don't owe the money. The simple rule is, you want to take money out of somebody else's pocket, you have to prove they owe you, and they don't have to prove that they don't. They don't have to prove that they don't. However, we have an opinion which comes up later in the fifth chapter by Sumchus. Sumchus says, if the nature of a case, not the claims, but the case itself leaves us in doubt, the case itself is unknowable. The case itself is unknowable. In such a case, that's called mamon hamutu b'safek. That's called money that is placed in a doubt, a true doubt, and therefore what cholkin, we split it. Okay, we'll get there later. We'll learn all about it. Today we're going to contrast our Mishnah with the opinion of Sumchus and see about yes and no with an incredibly beautiful analysis of the Mishnah. Okay, we learn the following. I said, one ox is chasing another ox. And clearly the other ox became damaged. Zeh Omer, okay, the victim says, it was your ox that was chasing my ox that damaged it. The Zeh Omer, the one who's the owner of the chaser says, what? This is Loki. That's not what happened. Rather, your ox was damaged on a rock. Okay, we know about the chasing, etc. We don't know the damage. The answer is what the Mishnah says: Hamotzi mitavero, all of haraya. Whatever the person wants to extract from his friend, he has to bring the proof, and if not, if he has to bring the proof. Let's say two oxen from two different guys were chasing one ox. Okay, and we have Zeh Omer. The chaser number one says to chaser number two, your ox did the damage. And chaser number two, Omer, says to chaser number one, your ox did the damage. Each one can say it wasn't my ox. Shnei and Peturim, both of them are exempt because since each of them can say to the owner of the chasee of the ox that got chased, since they can also say, listen, you bring a proof that my ox damaged you, and otherwise goodbye, Charlie. Okay. Okay, let's say the two oxen that were chasing the one ox were both owned by one man. Now they're both obligated. When the oxen are obligated, means we're going to take the money out of both of them. Okay. Let's say there was one large ox and one small. Okay. And now what's the problem? You know that when when an ox scores in the first three times and it pays half damages, its payment is limited by the value of the goring ox. Now, maybe the big ox can absorb the half damage of the, and maybe the small ox can't. So now what happens? Anizak Omer, huh? Yeah, exactly. Anizak Omer Godel Izak. Anizak, so listen, it was your big one that can cover my loss, my half damages. Amazik Omer Loki says that's not what happened. It was the small one. Sorry, there's not enough money there to pay you. You only get that amount. Echad Tam Bechad Mur, or another similar case. The same guy owns both oxen, and they're both chasing, but one of them is an unwarned ox, and one of them is a warned ox. Anizik Omer Munezik. He said, listen, he said the damage. He says what? It was the warned one. You owe me full damages. So Mazik Omer, the guy who did the damage, he owns the two guys. Loki, that's not what happened. No, it was the unwarned one. I only owe you half damages. Again, what's the rule? Hamotzi mechavero, all of araya. You want to collect? You have to bring a proof. Now. Now, this is incredible. Let's say the damaged oxen were two. Echad gadol ve'echad katan. There were two damagees, a big one and a small one. V'mazikim shnayim, and the damagers were two. Echad gadol ve'echad katan, one big and one small. Anizak Omer said, what? Now, the Nizak, he wants to get the most money. What is the damagee says? Your big one damaged my big one, so I have more from your ox to collect from. Right, exactly. I got a bigger my bigger damage comes from your bigger ox. But katan is a katan. My smaller damage comes from your smaller ox. They'll cover. Okay. A mazik omer loki says, no. The mazik, that's not what happened. He says, he says, my little one did your big one, and he can't cover the whole the proper damage. And the big one damaged your small one. You only get a little. Okay, and the big one damaged the small one. Okay, I'm only going to pay you, but I'm only going to pay you for the small one. Okay. Furthermore, let's say one was let's say one of the damagers was unwarned and one was warned. Anizak Omer, okay, and also again there were two. The damagees were one big and one small. Anizak Omer, the damagee says, he says, your warned ox did my big one, so I'll get full damages on the big ox. But Thomas Akatan, it was your unwarned ox that damaged my small one, so I'm going to get half damages for the small, but full damages for the big. Amazik Omer Loki, he said that's not what happened. Thomas Agodo, he says, no, my unwarned ox did your big one, so you're only going to get half damages on your big one. My warned ox did your small one, so you're only going to get full damages on your small one. Again, Hamotzi Mechavero Olav. You want to collect, you have to bring the proof. Now, to get ready. Now we're going to get into the thick of it. He says he says, going back to the original case, the guy says, listen, your ox damaged when it was chasing, and we only know the result. The ox was damaged, but we can't prove whether it was the chasing ox or whether it was a stone. And he so that we said that the damager says it was the rock, and the damagee says it was your ox. Yeah.
What if there's circumstantial? There's blood all over the carrot.
Okay, so that's gonna be. I can't answer at the moment. We have to talk about it. So sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes yes.
Yeah. And we're gonna see. Bichlal also have to talk about other cases. There's a lot of peripheral issues here of chazaka. Sometimes we have status quos, but it's not here on the page. So I'm going to hold. Okay. Rav Chia Ba'Abba says Zosa Maris, from the fact that our Mishnah said what he says what you're the damages from the rock, and he says it was your ox. Okay. So we see what, and still we say no. You only want you have to prove it, and you can't. He doesn't have to pay without proof. So we see that the colleagues of Simcha's opinion was not unchallenged. We see that his colleagues, the rabbis, disagreed with him. The Amar, because he said, where the case itself is in doubt. Okay, then we split the money. So over here, what should be? Since we don't know if the animal got damaged on the rock, got damaged by the ox, it should be what? Split, and the damagee and the damager should split the claim. The damager should pay half of whatever he would have been obligated from his ox. So you see what the rabbis disagree. Slow down. Are you sure that this Mishnah is a contradiction? Is a contradiction to Sumchas? What are you talking about? Amar Sumchas Afilu Bari. Our Mishnah appears to be a case where each of them knows exactly what they're talking about. They're sure of their claim. He says, I'm sure it was the rock. He says, no, I'm sure it was your ox. He says, did Sumchas really say? Maybe Sumchas only said his rule when, for example, the damagee, where the plaintiff says, I'm sure you owe me, and the defendant says, maybe I don't. Maybe it's only there. Maybe only there Sumcha says that you split it, where the claimer is positive and the defendant is in doubt. But where they're both positive, maybe even Sumchas, like over here, which our Mishnah appears to be one. He says, no, I'm sure that I don't owe you. I'm sure that the rock did it. Maybe even Sumchas would agree. Okay, maybe even Sumchas would agree that that you have to bring a proof. Amar Lacy said to me, I said, no, it's true. I'm telling you, you're right. Amar Sumchas Afilu Bari. Even when both the claimer and the defendant are positive, Sumchas would still say what? That you split it, and therefore our Mishnah is clearly in contradiction to Sumchas. Gemara says, let's slow down 1 minute. Here, the way that we asked over here, we assumed, like I just explained to you, we assumed that our Mishnah was where both cases were sure. I mean, my demasnisim bebariu barihu. How do you really know that our Mishnah is a case of both are positive and we are in direct and 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 contradicting sumchas? Okay. Diktani, okay. How do you know it? Okay, so how do I know that it's really positive? Diktani, because he said, Ze omer shor chahezik, v'ze omer loki. I'll tell you what, because that's the language. He said, your ox did the damage. The other one said, it's not so. That's not what happened, but it was on a rock, and therefore what? It sounds that even the defendant is positive, not only the accuser. If Rav Papa says, slow down. You want to tell me that from that language you think that it's positive? Now, look again. We've discussed this many times. Our primary assumption is that Mishnayos are written consistently for lots of reasons. But that's so so when a circumstance if the Mishnah takes place under a certain set of circumstances, we're not going to assume that they're different from one part to the other. And this is very important. I want to tell you why. Whenever there's no direct instruction, remember the Mishnah is our teacher. We're relying on the Mishnah to keep our tradition straight. So you can't tell me that that so to speak the venue or the circumstances change from one part of the Mishnah to the next without any instruction. What kind of instructor is that? It's a wild card. We have no way to know what student could possibly understand the tradition correctly. So we assume that the venue, so to speak, the circumstances in one part are going to match the circumstances in another. Otherwise, the Mishnah would be utterly confusing. So he says, I'm going to ask you a kasha. He says, Midaresha bari ubari. Now that you read the opening of the Mishnah, where both the claimer and the defendant are positive, okay, he says, Seifa nami bari ubari. Then I have a right to assume, according to what you're saying, that also the latter part of the Mishnah is where both are certain of their claims. Ema Seifa, but it's going to be a problem. That's going to lead to a difficulty. How do I read the Seifa, the later part of the Mishnah? We said, well, we had two oxen doing the chasing, and one of the chasers was big and one was small, and they both belonged to one guy. Okay, and one of them damaged the other, the chasee's ox. Nizak Omer Gadol Hazik, the damagee says what? He says what? It was the big one that did it, and I'll be able to get the half out of the whole body of the big one. Umazik Omer Loki, and the damage says no, Elakata Nazik, it was only the small one, and there's not enough to cover. You're not going to get your whole half damages. Okay, we said or alternatively, Echad Tam Echad Muad, one of the chasers was unwarned, and one was warned. Nizak Omer Muad Hazik. Again, the damagee says what? It was the warned one that did it. I get full damages. Hamazik Omer Loki, and the damage says no, it's not true. That's not what happened. Elatamezik, it was the unwarned, and you only get half damages. We said Amotzi Mechavero Ola Baraya. Whoever is going to extract from the fan has to bring a proof. Okay, and we can see Halo Maisi Raya, but the implication is that's very important. I hesitated because I don't want to say it then. He says that the implication is what? Here, if you want to extract something, you have to bring a proof. Whatever you want to extract from the guy that he doesn't want to give you, you have to bring a proof. Hello, Maisi, what's the raya? What's the implication? If he didn't bring a proof, Shakol Kadam Ramazik, he takes what he's not extracting, what the guy told him. He said, okay, but he's getting is the small one, he's getting the half, he's getting from the small one. He has to bring a proof to extract. But whatever he's not trying to extract, the guy's giving him. He said my small one, or he said or the unworn one. He gets paid. Would that be an example of no different? Exactly. Get ready. Yes, and here's the problem. And there's a caveat in this case. Okay, it's a caveat in this case. What does it mean to say what? He says, Neima Tebi Tiyufta. This is why, Rabbi, because Neima Tebi Tiyufta, the Rabbi Bar Nasan, this is going to be a knockout blow to a very important principle that we learn from Rabbi Bar Nasan. The Amar Rabbi Bar Nasan has a famous rule. Ta'ano chitim. If the claimer says you owe me a kilo of wheat is more expensive than barley. You owe me a kilo of wheat. The Hodula Basori says, no, I owe you a kilo, but it's barley. I owe you a kilo of barley, much cheaper. Okay, Potter, the guy who's accused is exempt from paying anything. He doesn't even pay for the barley. Why? Well, now there's lots of argument about this. We're going to say the Rashi way. What's the reason? If a guy says you owe me a kilo of wheat, okay, you owe me a kilo of wheat. He says, I owe you, but I owe you a kilo of barley. For the moment, we're going to assume that since he claimed wheat, he completely forgoes any claim to the barley. He said, look, it's wheat or nothing. You owe me wheat. No wheat, I have no claim on you. So therefore, what? So we assume if he claimed wheat and the guy admitted to barley, he's exempt from paying anything because the guy says, I have no claim. I'm not claiming. Yeah, I'm not claiming. I have no claim. I let go. I'm a vater. I forego any obligation. I'm a vater. There's a lot of different explanations, but I forego the obligation. So now I have a problem. But the way you told me was over here, it's the same thing. If he said what, he says the big one did it. He says small one's not admitting part of the big one. He says, well, he's saying what? He's saying what? It's a completely different. They're two different things. It's barley, exactly, or the worn one and unworn one's the same thing. So now, according to what we said, if you tell, so I have a problem in the Seifa, it's going to contradict the known principle. And I don't want to contradict the known principle. Now, we haven't asked the kasha yet. Remember, you told me that the opening was what? Was each guy was sure. Now, I've told you I have a problem in the Sefer. Why? Because it contradicts the known principle that if a guy claims wheat and we admit the barley, we pay nothing, because it looks like here he claimed wheat and we admitted barley, and he's paying the barley. He's paying the half damage, or he's paying from the small ox. Okay. Ella, okay, so you're forced to say, in order not to contradict Baba Barnasa, you must say what? Bar Veshema. The whole reason why that he's still paying is because why? Is because it was a case of not of each guy claiming for certain, but one guy was certain, one guy said maybe. I go, so now let's analyze. He's not done. The Kamar Bariman, the Kamar Shemaman. Who's the one who says I'm sure, and who's the one who says maybe? Name of the Kamar Nizak Bari. If you're going to say what that the accuser is sure, he says, look, it was your big one or your warned one. The Kamar Masik Shema, and what? And the damager is the one who said, look, maybe it was my small one, maybe it's my unworn one. Then that would still be a knockout blow to Robert Barnasan. Okay, why? Because why? Because if you tell me the mazik says, listen, I don't know what it was, okay, and I don't know whether it was the big one or the small one, or it was the warned one or not. So it's going to still be a kasha. Why? Because Robert Barnasan says that he is that that he doesn't even have to pay what he admitted to. And here you tell me what? That still, again, we still have the same problem, that the defendant is still going to pay at least what he admitted to. Ella, so you're forced to say what? It's a different case. The Karmanizak Shema, it must be what? Where the damagee says, look, maybe it was your big one, maybe it was your warm one. The Kamar Mazik Bari, and the damager says, listen, I'm positive that what? That it was the small one, or I'm positive that it was the unworn one. And that's why it's no contradiction to Rabbi Bar Nassan. Why? Because since the claimer is not making a sure claim, so therefore he does. So therefore the the defendant doesn't even have to pay what he admitted to. Had the guy said for sure, that's it. Okay, pardon me. Therefore he does have to pay. Why? Because since the claimer never said, I want this, so he never gave up on the other claim. I'm not clear. What was the reasoning we said? Why, if you claim wheat and and he says barley, you don't pay the barley. He said, you don't owe me. I give up. I have no claim on barley. I forego any claim on barley. But over here, when he said, look, I don't know, maybe you owe me. The guy says, yeah, I owe you barley. So he never said, I'm not claiming barley. He said, maybe you owe me this, maybe you owe me that. He never said, I'm sure that it's wheat, not barley. So I'm sure I want wheat and I don't want barley. He didn't know. So now, in order to defend this mission, now this is the same trick I've told you many times. When we see, this is a very important principle. When I see that an accepted opinion, okay, won't work in a Mishnah, I do the Mishnah according to that opinion because I know that rabbi knew what he's doing. I know that. So since I know, and rather than say the Mishnah contradicts an accepted principle, so to speak, or an accepted opinion, I'd rather read the Mishnah. So the Mishnah must be, in order not to be a contradiction to this principle of wheat and barley, I must say what? That it's a case where what? It's a case where the claimer says maybe, and the defendant says, I'm sure not. So he has to pay because the claimer never gave up on the lesser claim. But then I got a problem. Okay. Are you forced to say? Now I got a problem. Umi the Seifa, Nizak Shema Mazik Bari, and now he's finally getting to his question. Now that I see that this latter case has to be what? Where the claimer is in doubt and the defendant is sure. Reisha, I have to say, by our principles, the Mishnahs are written consistently. Nami Nizak Shema Umazik Bari. It must be also a case where the damagee is in doubt and the defender is sure. But Omar, okay, and you're going to tell me now 1 second. So if the beginning was the defendant says, I'm sure it was a rock and not my ox, and the damagee says, maybe it was your ox. You want to tell me what? Well, Omar Sumchas, you're going to tell me over there that we're contradicting Sumchas? What? You're gonna tell me that Sumcha said afilu baha? You want to tell me that even a case where the claimer says maybe it was your ox, and he says no, I'm sure it was the stone. You tell me even there, Sumchas would say that you split it. He said, would you ever think that Sumcha said you do split it, so that I should have to tell you according to the rabbis you don't? That's ludicrous. Nobody in their right mind would ever have thought that we split it in such a case. The guy's not even sure if he's got a claim. He's not even sure he got a claim. What are you talking about? Okay, Mer says no. He says that's a good kasha, but I'm going to tell you. No, he says, I'm not going to agree with you. I'm not going to accept that because the latter part was where the damagee was in doubt, and the damager was sure. I'm not going to say it's the same case in the beginning. It's rather what? Lo, the seifa in the latter case, like we said, nizak shema. It's where the damagee is in doubt, maybe. Okay, umazik bari, and the damager says this, and I'm sure that it was the small one. I'm sure that it was the unworn one. Ratio, but the beginning, where we don't know whether it was damaged by the chaser or by the rock, nizak bari, it's where the damagee is for sure. Umazik shema, like we said, remember, like we said the other part, that's umazik shema, and what? And the damager said maybe, okay, maybe it was the rock, and there Sumchos would have said what split it, and the rabbi said, "I come to tell me what that we don't." 1 second, Vahaladami, 1 second. How do you read a Mishnah that way? The opening part is where the damagee is sure and the damager is unsure, and the later part is where the damagee is unsure and the damager is sure. How writes a Mishnah like that? It's inconsistent. Okay, Vahaladami, the ratio of the seifa. It's not like that. Well, the ratio is not consistent with the seifa. Amri, they said, this is such a beautiful answer. He says, no, it's consistent. It's still consistent. Opening with the damagee sure and the damager unsure, and later the damagee unsure and the damager sure is called consistent. Why? Amri, why? Okay, because you know what? Bari v'shema, shema bari, whether it's sure and unsure or unsure and sure, had milsi, that's still consistent. What? It's still the point that one, it's the same circumstances where one is sure and one is not. You're right. Who sure has changed? But since each case is what? Since both of them are one sure, one not sure, even though the positions are reversed, that's called consistent. That's the same circumstances in both cases. Bari, Shemu Bari, but to go from what? From sure and sure to sure and not sure, Trey Milunu, that's two different things. Okay, that we'll call it off. It's a very beautiful answer. That is sufficiently consistent for the Mishnah to rely on the student to understand the point. Have a wonderful day. We'll continue tomorrow. Yeah.
It would seem the blood, the rock is all
Could, yeah.
that the Benson would take that into account.
Of course, you realize that you realize. Oh, take a look. A guy can say, "Listen, you know what? I have 2 rocks. Half your rocks go back.
I understand.
He bled all over the rock.
I understand, but in Gadol the
But
and one ox has got an injury of his
Yes.
horns are all
yeah.
bloody.
And to support you here. The people hold the flower. I left all this stuff out. I mean, a lot of stuff I left out today because it's too complicated. There's a lot of people who claim Bechlal, a muad is a chazaka.
Right. It's usually the muad because you're dealing with stuff right.
We did it. A lot of things. So the answer is yes. I think like. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have that book. But
If they're using art scroll, they need to bring the
yes,
second
the answer is
bar.
yes. You have to bring both. You need both or just the second?
No, we need
Oh.
both.
You need both. Okay.
Unless you can